You're listening to the Self-Disruption Show on iHeartRadio with Audrey Lawrence, hacking business, science, and psychology to smash your goals.
Hey, it's Audrey Lawrence, and welcome to another episode of the Sea Change Network, broadcasting on WWPR or wherever you get your Sea Change podcast. Understanding how our brains do that, why they do that, how we can hack science and psychology to get closer to our goals. And today we have a returning guest by popular demand and an epic topic. The topic is, drumroll please, cue the scary music, perfectionism. Our guest is an absolute winner, and I'm so grateful for his time. Dr. Andrew Martin, licensed in New Jersey, Maryland, Ohio, and Virginia, and a graduate of the George Washington University, a professional psychologist. You can find him under the roof of the Princeton Psychology Group, and a true hero helping decode some of these aspects about perfectionism. Welcome, Dr. Martin. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here again.
Listen, this point of perfectionism is, and I'll just share personally, it is absolutely such a bottleneck to our success. It is that moment when we decide to make a decision in our life and then we pull back. That internal conversation that renegotiates why we should move forward, that tucks us down if it's built in doubt or procrastination. I've struggled with it as a designer submitting my work to magazines, as an author submitting my products to industry. It's horrible, but getting our hands around perfection can unleash our success, can open up our road. What do you think about all of this? Where do we start on this huge spaghetti mess of perfectionism?
Oh, well, let's start with the meatball on top, I guess. So perfectionism comes up a lot in some of the work I do in therapy. And one of the common things that I invite people to think about is that perfectionism is really a binary approach to your work. Either you win or you lose. There's no middle ground in between. And that's not a very forgiving or fair place to start in any work that you do, right? It closes the door for what you can learn. It closes the door for minor, medium level successes you can claim along the way. And as I think the metaphor I used last time, nobody runs a marathon the first time they put on running shoes. So if you're aiming for perfection right out of the gate, then you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, I've seen it. I felt it. It's managing. It's not just identifying, my expressed vision behind all of this. My bigger goal is to isolate those tips and tricks and hacks that can help us, the goal-seeking audience, the people who have dreams and wishes, who want to move out of that 93% failure category and start owning that 7% of success, hacking some of these tips. And what I have learned about the pursuit of perfection is that psychology has it that's where we should dive into when we want to understand that. And I always like to say psychology because people get like, oh, it's not my field. It's not my speciality. I met with a coach this week and he said, well, I don't like to go into psychology side of it. And I thought to myself, well, gosh, isn't that so sad? Because psychology is the study of our brain. It's to describe, explain, predict, and change behaviors. And aren't we all entitled? I get it that our mind didn't come with a handbook, but ultimately, shouldn't we be entitled to sort of pull apart this psychology science and help us hack our own life for success? So I want to do that today on perfectionism. I want to pull it apart. I want to understand real tools and tips that are going to propel us forward. So do you have suggestions about how to catch and capture that moment when we're being too perfectionist, is that a word? And start really owning that moment and saying, no, stop this moment that is hindering my success.
Sure. Yeah, I think there are a couple tells, right? So first is in identifying the goal, right? Is the goal too restrictive? Is it too high a bar to set for yourself? Another is what's the role of criticism in your pursuit of that goal? Is it just negative? Is it just identifying where you fell short, or is it also some positive critical feedback of where you did better than last time, where you struggled but you figured something out? because that's a more forgiving approach. And when I work with people in treatment that struggle with this, I invite them also to think about the alternative to perfectionism is the excellence model. The excellence model is you can still push yourself and pursue lofty and challenging goals, but it's a very different mindset in terms of how you go about it. It's not a binary approach like perfectionism is.
Yeah, it needs to be measured in, I'm hearing from you, setting not the bar too low, but setting yourself up for success instead of failure, allowing for you to frame it in another way. For me, I feel like taking that moment when I can't do it because it's not good enough is what it translates for me on the inside. It's not ready to ship. When I go into a project, I now at the front end say, what is my definition of done? Because I know I could be a crazy perfectionist. Like I could be like crazy, like can't leave a room without putting things right where they belong. And that's gonna like handicap my success. So I say to myself, what would be my real failure? I'll give myself 2 tips. So for example, this week I've been riddled with it. I'm sending out all these press kits all over. My agent's got me moving these like media pictures of this with articles, and I'm like in the weeds. So I said to myself, all right, I just can't get lost in what kind of font goes out on these articles. I just need to ship it. So I did 2 things. What would be my failure? My failure would be a spelling error, because hello, I'm famous for that. So if I could get this thing done without a spelling error, and I could get this thing done without sort of a font issue, that's it. If I did those 2 things, I set my bar really low, saying I wasn't going to worry about the image. I wasn't going to worry about any other aspect. If I set the opportunity at an achievable place and then grab an accountability partner. So I say to the agent's assistant, I say, I promise I'm going to get these out by the end of the week. And now suddenly, I got skin in the game. I've made a commitment. And when I take sort of my low bar of entrance, okay, spelling error, and my commitment with an accountability partner, and it doesn't have to be someone you really declare, but just somebody like I've owned this to, now she's expecting my email. Now suddenly it is a bridge over perfectionism, because I could sit there moving an image on an article about 1/10 of a millimeter 48 times and then asking everybody what they think. So learning to shut up, first identify my inner critic, and then shut it off with 2 actions that are give myself achievable outcomes. What is my definition of done as a failure? Okay. And who's going to be my accountability partner in this? Because guess what? Those 2 things, like a vortex, pull me right through to my finish line. And in the end, is it perfect and I could have done something better? I get to experience growth as a byproduct, and I don't go into it growth mindseted, unfortunately, but the outcome is I got it done, because I just want to find out ways to hack this and get it done. What do you think of my crazy techniques?
Yeah, no, it's a very valid approach. It's what we call operationalizing something, putting up some sort of metric and operational approach to accomplishing the goal. What's the stepwise procedure that you're going to get there in real world terms. And what it does, it helps also defuse the procrastination that is very common in perfectionism.
Yeah, I definitely see that as an ongoing internal conversation. I've kind of broken my perfectionism down into 2 categories. For me, just personally, it seems like it falls under doubt or procrastination. And when it's doubt, I sort of have to have that sort of pep talk about worthiness and say, why can't I try this? Why am I not? Who's holding me back from this? Just me. Why do I have to undo my own validation? And if it's procrastination, then I have to ask myself, am I prepared? Have I done the inroad steps to prepare my process so that I can move to the next level? Because sometimes procrastination has a purpose in my life, saying, oh crap, it's just not done enough. Okay, well, make those standards. What are the 2 things I need to isolate for failure? I'd fail if it had a spelling error. I'd fail if I didn't get it out by my deadline. Okay, so if it meets that, you got to ship it, folks. You got to get these things done. My goal isn't to have a perfect press kit. My goal is to be able to reach people with a speaking platform who are interested in this topic. And I can't get to that end destination. I can't get to that distant shore if I don't get on the boat and sail through procrastination and self-doubt and perfectionism.
Right. I think the other thing in there is fear, right? The fear that, if you send it out, even in the best shape that you can, are people going to accept it?
Oh, yeah.
That's what leads to the perfectionism model being so dangerous, is that it perpetuates the fear that in some way I'm going to be found out, I am going to be criticized, and then I'm not going to be perfect, and it's going to be interpreted as a loss.
Yeah, inner critic, hello. Like, which one of my inner critics would you like to meet? Does that officially make me crazy? Because sometimes I just wonder, like, who's in control of this? Am I so petrified by the inner critic or the perception of somebody else's critique? As an interior designer, I'd make these beautiful rooms. And then the opportunity came to get published in a magazine. And the first time I was terrified. I wrote the whole story in the book. And it's a great example of the first time you do it, it feels terrible. And by the 20th time, it's like you just build a skin up. And it's not even like I hardened a skin. It's just that I walked away going, you know what? It wasn't like me and like me as a being. It was like my work. Acknowledge that this is a separation between me and myself and my identity versus my work. And when I was able to break it into those two categories and say, no, they can dislike my work all they want. It's not a personal thing. And that's just like again, crazy interior conversation, but an important delineation for me to be able to submit my work to national magazines. And thank God I did. In the end, I won a National Design Award, but something was better than a perfect nothing. Half-assed something in that case was much better than a perfect nothing. It brought me into this opportunity of growing my career, but I wouldn't have done it if it wasn't for being able to shelf perfectionism.
Right. Yeah. And in what you're saying too, it pulls apart this thing that we confuse very easily in our culture, is who we are is not necessarily what we do. That being and action are on some level two different things, and when it comes to perfectionism, I think those get confused, right? Where you are measured by your actions. And of course, in some context that's a valid, critique to make, but in the context we're talking about today, the quality of who you are as an individual needs to be able to grow through your actions and not just be limited by, the final push or the final product that's on the table.
Yeah, it's so hard to find that line between I'm a brand, I'm a doctor, and I'm a great doctor versus, I'm a good husband, father, partner, friend, fill in the blank, and value each of those versions of ourselves. Unfortunately, we put so much energy into the professional brand that we are. We educate ourselves, we put awnings and have business cards made up. And, it's the only time we see who we are on paper is when we declare it for our career. But in our own lives, I don't carry a business card that says Audrey Lawrence, mother, wife, mom of the year, excellent grocery shopper, and super good microwaver. These things don't create in our minds the brand that we are personally, but it's almost like we should pull back and really love up the personal brand that we are if we're going to go into a place where we're going to be critiqued professionally and know what that line looks like. And we all have a job and we all have a home life, but if it's going to sting to be critiqued in your job, then you need to draw that line and say, okay, that's just going to have to stay at the front porch and it's not going to come into my home life, because I think those critiquing conversations can sort of encroach into your whole life. And what was upsetting at work, we bring home with us.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And, the other thing is when you get a win, if you're living under the perfectionism banner, that win is going to haunt you. Right, you're always going to be chasing it and fearing. Okay, next time I'm on stage, or next time I'm turning something in, am I going to be as good as last time? And then it becomes, the win actually becomes a bit of a ghost that can haunt you.
Is that because we set the bar so high for ourselves that becomes our baseline of approach?
Well, it can be, especially under perfectionism, right? Is that if you think about that binary approach that perfectionism forces you into, either it's a W or an L, it's got to keep moving forward and exceed where you were last time. Otherwise, it's going to be a loss.
Okay,
right? But in thinking about it from an excellence perspective, growth and excelling is not a straight line. God does not draw in straight lines. The world does not let us draw in straight lines always. There's very windy, curvy paths that we take to get where we are. even the luminaries of our society, I think that, their histories would point to that.
Yeah, definitely. I think you see success in the stock market and you see growth, but when you look at the chart, it's a jagged mountain range of up. And
Right.
and if we can wrap our brains around, what, some days are a step back to get 2 steps forward, and the
Mhm.
measurement isn't how high our bar was ever set for us one time and we're going to leap over that, but the process it took to hit that goal, that arc of success that happened for you, maybe not prize that apex, prize the effort that it took to get there. Prize the jagged mountain range of 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Is that right? Did I get that backwards? So that we achieve, positive future growth. It doesn't happen, like, as you say, in a straight line. So how do we break that into a practice when critiques feel like criticisms and perfectionism starts kicking in? What are some tools to remind us that this is a bumpy mountain range of success?
Yeah. So back in my younger days, I was on a swim team that had the motto, "The pursuit of excellence." So I think that's one way to frame it. And instead of defining, I need to do this, I need to meet that bar, exceed that bar, I need to be the certain version of myself of, whether that's height, weight, whatever. So to view it more as I'm a person pursuing what I value and what I feel to be an excellent pursuit in this world. The next step beyond that, I think, would be to really take an honest assessment of, when you do have setbacks, ask yourself kind of what you're saying is, what did I learn? What did I learn from this? That my story does not end at this point where I've not gotten what I want or not achieved what I want, but it goes on. And how do I learn from this in order to keep that forward trajectory moving?
Yeah. Recognizing that if you can't come up with some sort of nugget of takeaway, then this is just going to be your stumbling stone and this is the end of your journey.
Sure.
And are you ready to give up on your goals? Are you ready to be the 93%? Are you ready to pack it in? Because the reason most people don't get to their goals is that they quit too soon.
Right.
The disruption and the failure along the path cause enough for them to recuse themselves and say, nope, I'm good. I'm out. I tried. I'm done. But winners, the line between the 93% and the 7%, the people that say, I'm going to keep going. I'm not going to give up just yet. Tomorrow is another day. I'll give up tomorrow, but today I'm going to continue doing it. I think part of that for me looks like trying to stay more present, which is so hard. I almost hate the being present movement. Don't send me any emails, please. But it's so hard. It's so hard to know in the moment what we're meant to be valuing. It's so hard to not be goal driven and future thinking and outcome aligned. So how do we love the process, but stay in the moment?
Well, by committing yourself internally to what's valuable, and then doing the best you can to refine who you listen to around you. Because our culture does a great job of, pushing this perfection as a model. And if you have success, well, you better do better next time. You're going to be a flash in the pan, in the dustbin of history. And yet there's many sophomore attempts that come back and knock it out of the park on their third try. So it's just to slow that down. I think it's two things. One is, having that internal focus and doing the internal work around what are you going to build your approach on? How are you going to operationalize it internally? And what are you going to pay attention to? Then who's going to reflect it back to you, around you?
Wow. I feel like I need like real boiling down tips. So, because there's so much here. I mean, we could just go on for ages on this topic of perfectionism. I think when I'm in the moment and I'm scrubbing a baseboard, okay, let's just give you some framing. Audrey's dusting baseboards because they look horrible. Okay, I really don't dust baseboards. Let me make something that's more realistic. Some of the things that go through my mind are what other people are going to think about my dirty baseboards or my fill in the blank. How do we address framing it in our own mind? No one said anything to me, but in my mind, I'm thinking that, oh, my mom, what would she say? But sorry, mom, about these baseboards. And how do I get that monkey off my back? Because I can't imagine that there's any part of that is fruitful to the outcome of my day. It's got to be default mode, network, out of control, lost in negative thought. How do we tame that monkey?
Yeah. So one way is this comes up a lot in my work, of the distinction between humiliation and humility, right? So if those dirty baseboards, which are part of just about everybody's house, right? if people are really honest, we all got dirty baseboards somewhere lurking.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of this obvious secret that we all have things like that. And if we try to like push it away and pretend it's not there, then people tend to set themselves up for humiliation, because sooner or later something comes out. There's people notice a flaw, they notice that the dirt around the corner, and then parent comes over and says, "Oh, you got a little cleaning to do there, honey." But if you pull it close and say, "Yeah, I know, I got some stuff I got to clean up. I got piles of laundry I got to fold. I got stuff that I got to do." If you pull it closer, then you pivot to humility. Right? The humiliation is trying to hide your dirty laundry, metaphorically, literally. Humility is pulling it closer and owning it. When you do that, you take away its sting.
So if I own it in front of 3 million people on our WWPR show, will I then be like cleansed? It'll be like a baptism of psychology where I'm like, okay, good. I won't carry this around with me. I get that. It makes sense. I appreciate what you say. It's the idea that this is a shame that doesn't belong to me. It is a byproduct of life. Dust falls. There's only us in our lives to manage these things. And when I look at it from the human factor, from everybody's got these issues, and it's not my responsibility to carry around the idea that this needs to be, not that I don't need to manage it, but that I don't need to manage the upset factor of it. I don't need to have shame about it. I don't need to hold on to it should be perfect because somebody will have something to say. And if they have something to say, then what do I do? What happens in that moment when someone says, and my mom hasn't said this, so don't, because she's going to call me and yell, and be like, XYZ, Audrey, this, and make a comment that I'm not comfortable taking. What do I do with those feelings? Because I think those can propel into more. I think that it can be this wagon wheel that keeps spinning down the road, and suddenly one little thing causes me to, now I'm really washing baseboards. And that I tell you, I'm probably going to do baseboards today. Honestly, this show has got me all freaked out for now. I'm like seriously looking around. But how do we quiet that internal critic that can get put on a longer internal negative path because it was ticked off by somebody? Sure.
Yeah. So one thing that's possible to do is, going back to what we were talking briefly about around the distinction between who you are and what you do, right? If you hear that critique of the baseboards as a reflection of who you are, then that's shame and humiliation. They go hand in hand. If you hear it more as sort of a reflection of, yeah, I do got to do that, and maybe I was a little lazy and should have done it already, then that puts it more into the category of maybe a bit of guilt. And guilt's more workable, right? And we all, guilt can be a useful thing. It helps us do what we need to do in a timely manner. It helps us, drive the speed limit down the street for fear of getting busted. It's got more utility to it, and it's not a reflection of who you are, but it can be a reminder and sort of a little nudge in the tuchus to get you to do what you need to.
I love it. I think they're massive tools. I just want to recap for our listeners who are, if they're just tuning in and joining us, but we're talking about procrastination, we're talking about perfectionism and some of the pieces of it, which is procrastination and doubt. Understanding that inner critic can flare up, and we've got some ideas. Okay, we don't have any ideas. Dr. Martin's got amazing ideas, and I'm going to recap them. What I liked so much was the idea of setting parameters that make more sense. So don't measure yourself against the best, measure your successes and measure the opportunity of growth. I think if you reframe failures and you look at growth as sort of the sum of parts, that you have a better opportunity to keep yourself sort of out of that perfectionism sort of shadow. Finding accountability or an accountability partner who allows you to define your definition of done and move past things that can get you stuck in the weeds. Addressing doubt with worthiness, addressing procrastination with being more prepared, using critiques instead of criticisms to move you forward. What else, Dr. Martin? Before we go, tell us the wrap-up idea on this topic of perfectionism. Because I'm not perfect, so I'm just going to turn this over to you.
Yeah, well, I think that in itself is maybe one of the wrap-ups is just the road acknowledgement that no one's perfect, right? We all know that, but it's easy to convince ourselves otherwise when we compare ourselves to the neighbors, the people down the street, celebrities on TV. It's that image that gets perpetuated, right? But to remind ourselves that it's just that, it's an image, and the real work is done on owning the reality of the lived experience that you're in day to day, and being honest about what's the good and what's the growth opportunity. Owning the successes, big or small, but then also honestly owning, okay, this is the friction point. This is the rough edge that I need to keep polishing or need to learn about and try and figure out.
Well, I'm not even going to try to say that any better. Like, that was beautiful. And it is to the point, and it is a practice. I would say before we go that this isn't context that you do once and you're done and you move on. This is a daily, hourly conversation when you feel like this is standing in the way of your success. These are tools for you to say, yeah, you know what, I'm good enough. And I'm not going to let anyone else go live my dream because I'm too worried about the font. I'm not going to let anyone live my dream because I'm letting somebody else's version of myself cloud my own success. If you don't choose to grab onto your own dream, guess what? Somebody else is going to live it. So I wish all of you to get to live your dreams, to get to hit your goals, to get out of the 93% category, hit that 7% category. Dr. Martin, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you to all my listeners in Tampa on WWPR and everyone who's listening on the Sea Change Network. We're grateful to have you, and have a great day. Stay tuned for next week's guest.
Thank you for listening to the Self-Disruption Show with Audrey Lawrence. To learn more, go to audreylawrence.org and follow us on your favorite social media. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Grab your free downloadable gift at audreylawrence.org/gift.